Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about consistency, specifically consistency and productivity, especially for those of us that are neurodiverse or have ADHD, or maybe we haven't been formally diagnosed, but we might struggle with maintaining focus, maintaining consistency, and just really abiding by the stereotypical definitions of success that are perpetuated by this entrepreneurial industry. This is really what we're going to be digging into today. This is a topic that I love speaking about, and this is really kind of based off of a piece that I recently wrote called The Consistency Threshold. We're going to have a little fun today. It might get a little heated, but I'm really looking forward to it. So I have a working theory that I'm now labeling the consistency threshold. So if you're listening to the audio, you're going to know I just did kind of air quotes around that in the video version. But in preparation for this, I was trying to find a word for a thing that everyone seeks, but no one can obtain. Now, I know that this word exists, but my lack of, kind of formal literary chops and my B- in English class and the, 30 seconds I spent on Google kind of kept this at bay for me. But I feel like there's a word that's used in like an Indiana Jones movie or something like that, but it's like kind of like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's something that we're all trying to get, but it's always at bay. Now, this is something that for some of us is there. Some of us consistency comes so easy, but for some of us it doesn't. And that's exactly what we're going to be chatting about today. So, consistency. You can barely blink without seeing a message about consistency these days. We're often told it's the key to success in business, it's the key to success in our personal growth and personal development, it's the key to success with weight loss and content creation and learning new skills, and the list goes on. Just recently, I think it was this weekend, I read an entire chapter on consistency in a book called YouTube Secrets, really talking about how consistency was the key to success for growing on YouTube. Now, I'm not here to argue against the benefit of consistency in any way, shape, or form. Rather, my personal issue is that consistency itself is just not as easy as people make it seem. It's far more complicated than just post one video per week to master YouTube, or it takes 60 days to build a new habit. That's all nonsense. And this overly simplistic advice may work for some, but it personally has never worked for me. And if you're listening to this or watching this, I'm going to assume that you started because it hasn't been working for you either. And it's far too simplistic for those of us that are neurodivergent. So this is really what we're going to be taking a deep dive into today. So let's get started. Now, I want to talk to you about how the evidence is out there. So the evidence of consistency is out there. In my personal experience, I have seen that consistency does work. And in fact, I can see that it has been a vital part of success in so many people out there externally, people that I can visually see or follow online. When I look at the things that I personally do on a daily basis, like podcast, write, post videos, and so on, I can see that there's a lot of evidence in these realms that consistency works. The most successful podcasts out there have hundreds of episodes. Many of the ones that I follow and look up to have, 500, 600 or more episodes. And if we kind of break this down, this means that they've been consistently publishing for many years, like 9 years. If you've got 500 to 600 episodes and you've been putting out an episode once a week, that means that they've been posting for like 9 years. Even at 2 episodes a week, which is crazy, that's 4 to 5 years of consistent publishing. My personal most valiant effort with podcasting was 117 episodes before I broke and I stopped. The most successful YouTubers have been publishing videos for years, and they have thousands of episodes uploaded. If we take an example of Logan and Jake Paul, for example, they just had a recent documentary on Netflix that kind of took a look at their history. They started vlogging in 2006. And to get to the level of success they're at today, they've been publishing consistent videos on YouTube for 17 years. Personally, I was consistent on YouTube for about 3 months before I wasn't able to maintain it and I stopped. The most successful writers and bloggers that I personally have been able to witness, they've been consistently putting out written content for over 10 years. But don't get me wrong, I don't want you to think that this is only inside of the business and marketing realm. This spans far beyond that too. Personally, I've tried to read consistently for bed, but that didn't last. I tried to consistently do yoga. That didn't last. I've tried journaling, meditating, eating more vegetables, drinking fewer energy drinks, eating less cookies. None of those things lasted, and I've struggled with consistency every single one of those places. So I've been able to see that consistency has worked externally for others. Now, I also have gone through this process of trying to find evidence within myself. So if we're able to find evidence externally, the next step that I want you to take on this consistency journey is trying to find evidence within ourselves. And it's very often much easier to find external clues of success. We see a successful podcaster with 600 episodes, but that doesn't always translate back into, well, what does this mean for me? How can I actually apply this or have it benefit myself? I get it. So if you have struggled with consistency, I want you to know that that doesn't mean you are incapable of being consistent. And that's what I really want to tap into right now. There is evidence inside of every single one of us that we can, in fact, be consistent. Now, I want you to take a moment and think. What inside of your life have you been consistent with? I want you to search for proof. Where in your life do you have proof that you have had the ability to be consistent? So I'm going to give you just an example, a frame of reference from my own personal life. And this is going to be inside of the realm of my own personal health and fitness. I've been active for my entire life. I started working out when I was in middle school, and then ever since high school, I've consistently worked out every single week. And even since 2010, then I started to get super serious and I started bodybuilding in 2010. So if I were to only take that segment of my life when I was really serious and say 2010 through now, which is 2023, that gives me proof that I've been consistent with going to the gym 4 to 6 days per week for over 13 years. So that's proof inside myself that I can be consistent. While another example might not be good or healthy consistency, but I've consistently had an energy drink pretty much every single day, unless I was traveling in a country like Bali that didn't have them, or I was consciously trying not to consume them, which was recently, but I've pretty much had one every day since 2018. So I've struggled with consistency, but these examples show inside myself that, yes, I have proof that I can, in fact, be consistent because there's things in my life that I've been consistent with. So I want you to think to yourself, reflect, take a moment. Where is your proof? Do you do yoga? Do you read maybe in the morning with a cup of coffee? Maybe you read for 30 minutes before bed. Maybe you play an instrument. Maybe you journal every morning. Maybe you have a Sunday night movie ritual. Maybe you go to church. Maybe you carve pumpkins with your family every single year for, Halloween. Maybe you hum a song while you brush your teeth or sing while you're in the shower. What I want you to think back from is, where in your life can you find proof and evidence that you have been consistent or you can be consistent? As I reflect back on this for myself personally, what this tells me is there is evidence externally that people can be consistent, and I do have evidence and proof internally that I can be consistent. So it brings us into the next topic I want to talk about, which is consistency killers. So as I began to learn more about myself and, discuss this with kind of colleagues and people I know and friends and people I do business with. And a lot of them had ADHD or some type of neurodiversity. The conversation started to switch from what allows me to be consistent with this one thing, but not able to be consistent with this other thing. So with my own example, I've been very able to, let's say, be consistent with going to the gym, but I've just really struggled to maintain consistency with yoga. I've really struggled to maintain consistency with writing for bed. And I've struggled to maintain this consistency with uploading YouTube videos. So it's, okay, well, why can I be consistent with one thing, but not with this other thing? And that's where this concept of the consistency threshold came from. Now, I do want to kind of preface this and say, I did kind of come up with this theory and this concept and the name of the consistency threshold myself, but I don't actually know if this is a previously coined term or concept from somebody. I searched on Google for it after I kind of came up with the idea. I didn't see any research papers or any books or anything written on this topic. So I think it is my own kind of unique term, but if it does already exist, do not hesitate to let me know. So this is where I started to shift my focus from how to be consistent to, okay, what prevents us from being consistent? That's kind of where I started to take the direction of. So for those of us that are neurodiverse, such as ADHD, there's a term called the boom and bust cycle. This is described as, and I'm going to read here from where I was able to find the term, we alternate from periods of high productivity and engagement, followed by periods of exhaustion and burnout. Now, this is something associated with ADHD, neurodiversity, and it can be associated with autism. We are intensely drawn to things that we're passionate about. We do not like to disappoint people. We often say yes instead of no. We often wear masks and hide parts of ourselves, such as stimming and shaking and fidgeting. We also are constantly working to fit in with the people around us. We often struggle with things like executive dysfunction, and the list goes on. The important takeaway is that all of these little things, they compound. They all take energy to stop stimming, to fit in. Every time we're wearing a mask, anytime we have to task switch, every time we need to check a message, switch from meeting to meeting, start to focus on something, get distracted and refocus. All of these little things, they add up, they compound, they take energy. And oftentimes it eventually leads to a breaking point. We bust. This is the boom and bust cycle. We bust or we break, or if we don't, if our bodies don't, something does. Something we're trying to give our attention to does. Now, there's varying extremes of this. Now, for some of us, this might be on the spectrum of not being able to get out of bed. Very, very disabling. For some, it might be fatigue. For some, it might be burnout. And there is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. Every one of our experiences is highly unique and very individually ours. For me, I've had varying degrees of burnout, and I want to kind of describe how this has shown up in my own personal life with business. So a few ways this has impacted my own personal life. I podcasted consistently for 117 episodes, and then I completely stopped podcasting for 3 years. I had a stint where I was posting consistently on social media and TikTok. I was posting 2 to 3 posts a day. I grew my following up to 5,000 followers in 4 months, and then I completely stopped posting for upwards of a year. I built up an email list to about 1,200 people in just a few short months, and then I completely stopped sending emails, stopped writing that content, and I even closed my ConvertKit account. I've created and launched 3 or 4 courses, and I no longer actively sell or market any of them. And if I take this a step further, the burnout and exhaustion that I've suffered from all of the things in my own personal life, like I want to read before bed, but I cannot even bring myself to do it because of the level of exhaustion. When I get home from work, I just veg out. I want to do nothing except watch Netflix and just take it easy. So the burnout that I've personally experienced really forced me to reevaluate the need to pull back, the need to scale back, the need to do less. And this was highly, highly reinforced by my therapist. And I recently did put out a piece. It was written on my Substack. It was called "What Are You Willing to Sacrifice in Your Pursuit of Success in Business?" So I'll link that up in the show notes, in the video description. So if you want to take a look at kind of a little bit more of a deep dive into that experience, please give it a read. I'll probably translate that into a podcast in the future as well. So what I've personally found, and I've noticed this in others that I've associated with as well, is that this fatigue or accumulation of fatigue is a killer of consistency. And therefore, that kind of brought me to the idea that there may be a threshold of what we can realistically be consistent with. Now, I want to repeat that again. So fatigue, or the accumulation of fatigue, is killing consistency. And that's brought the idea that there may be a threshold of what we can realistically be consistent with before the fatigue gets too high and kills our consistency. So I want to talk to you about my own personal pattern of surpassing this threshold. So as a neurodiverse entrepreneur with ADHD, that's how I would personally identify myself. I have intense passions, I have intense interests, I thrive on novelty, and I've discovered about myself I am highly susceptible to fatigue, and therefore that leads to burnout and exhaustion. So I want you to take a second. Does any of that sound familiar? Do you resonate with any of that? Having intense passions and interests, thriving on novelty and craving dopamine, but also really noticing this fatigue and exhaustion and this pattern, kind of like a roller coaster, where we get super into stuff and we do a whole bunch of stuff, we get distracted always, and then we kind of burn out and we stop doing things and we kind of repeat. We feel a little bit better, get super excited. I'm going to walk through how this has shown up in my own personal pattern. So this is recent, but for example, I might start podcasting and then I love it and I want to start doing more. And this is the passion and the novelty. So I start doing video recordings. Like right now, I'm recording audio for a podcast, but I'm recording the video so I can post it on YouTube. So I start recording video and then I take those and I post them on clips. I post them across Instagram and TikTok and YouTube Shorts. Now I see YouTube as a fantastic opportunity to grow my business. Super awesome. Now this is the novelty kicking in again. So I take the full length version of this video and I post it on YouTube. Now this creates a need for me to learn more about YouTube and YouTube thumbnails, YouTube SEO, how to title videos so I can get more views. So I start listening to podcasts and buying books like the YouTube Secret book I told you about, and start reading tutorials on how to do this. But then I also realized that I love writing, so I start a Substack. This is my novelty kicking in again. Now I begin to think about, well, how do I grow my readership for my Substack now? So I need to start posting on Twitter because that's where I can use my words and drive them back to my Substack. Now this is the novelty kicking in. I love doing new things. And as you can see, this is just kind of like a perpetual fatigue death trap. You can see I went from doing a weekly podcast to doing a podcast, a YouTube video, daily short form clips across multiple platforms, a weekly newsletter on Substack, posting daily on Twitter, and all of the time learning, planning, recording, editing, and posting that's involved with all of this. And pretty much this is where the boom and bust cycle enters the show, and you can see that I'm kind of living my theory. My theory on the consistency threshold was birthed from me seeing it myself and then seeing it relevant in many individuals that are also sole proprietors, entrepreneurs, business owners. They have side hustles and they've been going through the exact same thing themselves. Now, an analogy that I really like is it's almost kind of like playing a game of Jenga. We start with a stack, a tower of Jenga blocks. And every time we pull something out, every time you take that turn in Jenga, you pull out a block, that is like we're adding something. We're adding a podcast. We're adding a social media platform. We start posting on YouTube. That's pulling out a block. And at some point, we pull out enough blocks, the tower falls over. So your threshold, that's the number of blocks you can pull out before your tower tips over. Now, I have lived a number of variations of this pattern for years. What ends up happening is I stack things up, I burn out, so I cut things back, I peel back, and I slowly recover. Once I'm recovered enough, I pretty much just start the process again. My neurodiversity is still there. I'm still neurodivergent. That's my wiring. That's a part of me. And I eventually just kind of find myself right back in the same routine. I start doing things. I burn out. And once I'm recovered enough, I start doing things. And then I burn out. And that's my pattern. Rinse and repeat. But the awareness that I have developed this pattern, the awareness and acceptance of my neurodiversity being a part of me, was a very important step. I started to understand who I was, and then I was able to start to make adjustments and make accommodations so that rather than fight this, rather than try and change who I am and fight my own human nature, I was able to start to accommodate it and start to actually move forward in a much more effective way. So how do we start to take care of our tower of Jenga blocks? Now, in future shows, in future episodes, I want to start to unpack much more of this in much more detail. But what I want to leave you with is, if we do in fact have a threshold, if you resonate with this and think, yes, there's definitely a threshold that I have that once I surpass, my consistency starts to fail, the thing that I want you to focus on is simplify and do less. In the example I showed, I went from podcasting and it quickly became podcasting, YouTube, writing, social media, Twitter, etc. My past pattern would be the boom and bust cycle would pretty much enter and I would crash, leading me to pretty much stop doing everything. Because of the accumulated fatigue, it was just not sustainable. But because I was able to recognize the pattern that I was on, I made the decision to remove YouTube. I've also let go of a number of other confounding factors, such as certain side jobs and side hustles that I had. I also was trying to learn to code as well. So I stopped a number of these things. I also stopped an emphasis on YouTube. I don't care about my thumbnails. I don't care about the titles. I'm going to put that content out there, but I'm not going to invest in learning. And I made like an actual physical, visceral decision. I took the YouTube Secrets book and I put it back on the bookshelf. Like, that was me making a conscious decision to stop investing my time and energy in that. I had to simplify and do less, or else I was going to break again. I was going to surpass my threshold. But this can impact all areas of our life. This isn't just going to be inside of business. So let's take an example in fitness. So let's say you start exercising 3 or 4 days a week. You're feeling good, you're enjoying it. So maybe you add a day, maybe you go from 3 to 4 days. Maybe you listen to a podcast from Andrew Huberman and you hear about the benefits of cardiovascular exercise. And so you try and add a couple sessions per week of cardio or some HIIT training. Now, you might also decide you want to start doing some yoga. You want to increase your mobility. You want to work on your back pain. But, one session a week isn't really getting you results. You got to do maybe at least 2 or 3 to see results. And very quickly we go from, training 3 days a week to exercising 4 or 5 days a week with strength training, trying to add in a couple days of cardio, and then we're trying to add in some yoga. And it very quickly becomes unsustainable. And this is where we hit the point of, how do we fit it all in? We can't. Something is going to give. We're going to either stop doing everything, or we're just not going to be consistent with yoga, or we're not going to be consistent with cardio, because we can't do it all. We have to simplify and we have to do less. Now, if you are wondering, yes, this is an example from my own personal life of the exact journey that I went on. And right now, the priority for me is I want to remove my back pain. I want to improve my health span. I want to improve how I age and my cardiovascular strength and my mobility as I start to get older. So what I had to do is I knew I couldn't manage everything if I was trying to fit all of that in. So I reduced my strength training sessions. Went from training about 6 days a week to training 4 days a week. And then I substituted in 2 20-minute sessions of yoga and one cardio session a week. So instead of trying to just stack and stack and stack, I scaled back some of those things and I brought some things in substitute so that I could manage it all. Because if I compounded everything together, it just wasn't going to work. Now, the same thing can happen inside of our personal development or personal growth journeys. We might read a book or hear about meditation and we want to start meditating. So we add it into our routine. But as we start to grow spiritually and advance on our personal growth journey, we might try and extend our practice. We might go from meditating a few times a week to trying to meditate daily. We might go from trying to meditate for 5 minutes to trying to meditate from 30 minutes. We might go from trying to meditate for 30 minutes to now we want to do 2 sessions per day. Then we might be hearing about other things and listening to podcasts, and then we start trying to add in other mindfulness practices and try to add in breath work and cold showers and infrared saunas and nature bathing. And we can see how we just start to, there's a term in the personal development space called spiritual striving, where we're just trying to check off more boxes and not really embracing and being present with what we're doing. But as you can see, the same pattern can happen in work. It can happen inside of our health and our fitness. It can happen inside of our mindset and personal development journey. It can happen in everything that we are doing. And the same principles apply. There's a threshold. Everything we're doing, from time to meditate to time at the gym to the work you're doing and the content creation, it is all energetic load. We have to simplify. We have to do less. We need to stay within our threshold. But your threshold is going to be unique to you, and it might take some time to figure it out. For some, that threshold might be super fucking high, and it might be super annoying to see people that just seem like they can do everything. But if we are neurodivergent, if we notice that we have a higher propensity of fatigue, we can't do as many things, that's okay. That might be us. That might be the phase of our life that we're in. It might be that we have some external stressors with family, relationship, loved ones, work that are outside of our control, and we have to make accommodations to make everything work. And that is perfectly okay. That is life. And that is something that not everybody understands, but I'm here for you because I know it, because I've lived it, and I'm trying to support you on this journey. We just need to start to try and become more aware and pay attention to those signs that if we notice our fatigue starting to grow, we start to get more tired, we start to see our motivation decreasing, we might start to feel cracks in that consistency, like it doesn't seem reasonable and sustainable, like me trying to be keto and not eat sugar, like this shit, that's just not going to work. Like I'm getting irritable, I'm getting hungry, I'm going to need a cookie in order to keep going. When you can see those things popping up in different areas of your life, not necessarily a ketogenic diet, but with time, you start to learn what that threshold is. And then it's just a matter of rinse and repeat and reduce and adjust and reduce and adjust. And you're going to swap things in and priorities are going to change. And that's totally okay. This is an ongoing and iterative process. You might add things in, realize it's a bit too much. You might need to peel things back. You might need to swap things out. Totally cool. Priorities change. For example, right now, I've reduced strength training so that I can incorporate yoga. However, I'm considering maybe trying boxing. And in order to incorporate boxing, I might need to reduce yoga or go down to training 2 or 3 days a week if I want to incorporate boxing. It's all just a balancing act. And that's going to be unique to you and what your priorities are. We just have to be open to the fact that the goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness and just being open to trying to figure things out. Now, the other factor of this is rest and recovery. Doing less is one part of the equation, but the other part that I found is rest and recovery, taking the downtime that you need. doing things that fill you up, doing things that excite you, that energize you. And this is going to be highly different. I really am not a fan of the people that shame people that want to play video games or watch Netflix, because sometimes you just need time in solitude to just be yourself. Yes, maybe reading is going to help you learn, but sometimes you just need to turn your brain off. Sometimes you need to recharge the batteries. So this could be nature bathing and going on a long walk on the beach or through the forest on the weekend. This might be going for a float or a sauna or a swim in the ocean. I live on an island now, so I have a lot of beach references here. But it might be meditating. It might be reading before bed. It could be staying home instead of going out with friends on a Friday night. It could be saying no to a family occasion because you need to recharge your batteries and you know that it's going to be draining on the weekend. It could be literally sitting and doing absolutely fucking nothing because that is what you need, and being gracious enough to yourself to respect what your body is asking for is a highly, highly important part of creating more consistency and respect for ourselves on this journey when we are neurodiverse. It is our wiring. It's who we are. It's not bad. We just simply need to make accommodations for who we are. There's nothing wrong with that. You just got to recharge the batteries, and that is totally okay. So I really hope that you enjoyed this kind of journey through this theory of the consistency threshold that I have, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you resonate with this? Do you have questions? Do you have feedback for it? Please let me know. Send me a message. You can send me a message or a comment on any of the platforms. And I feel very excited to continue to walk this journey with you and talk more about this topic. We'll talk to you soon.